We welcome you to a special edition of the Bleav in USC podcast. Rodney Peete, USC all-time quarterback great, joins the program. I'm Cooper Perkins. Thanks for spending some time with us. Rodney, it's college football season. The Trojans are finally back. And, how much fun is it from your perspective just to get to see this, right? You bleed cardinal and gold in a way that I don't think a lot of us can claim. I went to USC, but I didn't suit up. I didn't play quarterback. For you, it's got to be something a little bit extra.
It's special. It really is. To this day, look, I'm like 30 something years removed from playing quarterback at USC, but I still feel that passion. I still feel every snap. I mean, I'm with Miller Moss as he's out there playing. I just kind of, feel the intensity, feel what it's like for him to be under center for them. And, was hanging on to every single play last week against LSU. So, no, it's a great feeling for us to get off to the start like we did. I think there were so many people that doubted USC and were wondering what kind of team was going to show up, after last year and the defense being, abysmal and all this talk in the offseason about the guys bulking up and adding weight and all that stuff and all the hype. It was great to see that product finally get displayed on the field and to have the success that they did.
Well, we'll get to the defense in just a second. I want to zoom in on Miller Moss, the quarterback, who you mentioned at the top of that. It was interesting because this offseason, for the first time in his career, people seem to doubt Lincoln Riley's quarterback situation.
Mm-hmm.
There was very little said about Miller Moss. There was conversations before the bowl game, right, of bringing in Will Howard or another transfer into the program. And I'm so interested by the way he coaches the quarterback position. From your perspective, right, as a former QB, what is so special about a coach that is able to not just provide play calls, but provide options and answers like it seems like Lincoln Riley does so well?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that he does is he adapts to his quarterback, right? And I think that not all coordinators do that. Not all offensive minds do that. Sometimes you get caught up as a coordinator. I've been around them. They get caught up into their offense and, I'm going to spend all night, studying these plays and I got the greatest plays in the world and we're going to kill people on Saturday. And they're not willing to adjust from year to year. And sometimes what works for one quarterback doesn't necessarily work for the next quarterback. And I think the big thing with Lincoln Riley is that he plays to the strengths of the particular quarterback. I mean, you go back and look at him when he was at Oklahoma. He's got Baker Mayfield. He's got Kyler Murray. Those are, Baker moved around, but not like Kyler did, right? Kyler was a different animal when it comes to running around with the football, and he utilized that. Then you bring in Jalen Hurts, which is a different kind of guy in terms of playing quarterback. He's going from Caleb Williams now to Miller Moss. Obviously, Miller Moss can throw it with anybody, but he doesn't have the legs or he doesn't have the escapability and probably not the creativity that Caleb Williams had. So you've got to adjust to your quarterback. You can have your core system, as you want it to be, but the way you call plays has got to be something that really, kind of enables that particular quarterback to be at his best. And I think that is the one thing that Lincoln Riley does great is that he's not so much locked in. Well, Caleb did this last year and he did it well. So Miller, you got to do it this way too. He's not like that. He's like, okay, there are things you do better than Caleb, Miller. Let's focus on those and make you successful. And I think that is the biggest thing that he's really good at.
What I thought was so interesting, I said this on this program the week before the season started, was that this was going to be chapter one in the Lincoln Riley Scorched Earth Revenge Tour, because the offseason was just this whole cocktail of really pretty intense criticism, especially in the national media scale. I think less so locally in Southern California. I think people kind of, for the most part, were comfortable leaving that program to itself. And, you have the columnists that write things here and there that are critical. But generally speaking, Lincoln Riley came into this game having to prove a lot to the country, not to the fan base, right? Like, he's built up enough goodwill with us where I think we trust him. Last year didn't go great, but still that first year really goes a long way towards establishing a track record. I think it's so interesting the way he approached that game. Now, from a play calling standpoint, from a mentality standpoint, what did you take away from the way Lincoln approached game one against LSU?
I thought it was really a testament of his trust for Miller Moss. I think he put him in situations where he wasn't trying to necessarily protect him. I think obviously, the way he played in the bowl game and the poise that he had in that bowl game last year, I think gave Lincoln Riley a lot of confidence that, hey, I can throw the whole playbook at this guy and let him go. And there were situations where it was, backed up or third and long or third and tough situations where he let Miller Moss play. So his play calling, I think, was not one that was, I got to protect him. I'm scared. Oh, I don't want him to make a mistake. It was, I trust my quarterback to make the right read and make the right play in that situation. And he did that. It showed up on that last or second to last drive. I think when they hit the touchdown to go ahead, it was, let's be aggressive. Let's go after it. There was a free play. Guy jumped off sides. And what I loved about that is Miller Moss knew it right away. He's like, I got a free play. I'm going to take a shot. And they took the shot and got the touchdown. It was really good. But I think that, for Lincoln Riley, when you say, the revenge tour, I think part of that is right because he took a lot of heat. Look, around the country, and I get a chance to travel quite a bit. There are people that question, will SC ever be back? How did, can they get back to the Pete Carroll days where they were dominant? What happened to USC? And that is a lot of the narrative around the country. But I think playing in that game against a SEC opponent like LSU did wonders, number one, for the program, but also I think for Lincoln Riley as a coach, because it wasn't with Baker Mayfield or Kyler Murray or Jalen Hurts or Caleb Williams. It was, okay, I got a new guy in here. I'm going to show you that this system works, and I get the right guy in here. I can make that guy be successful in my system. And it was great to watch, and I think it gave a wake up call, I think, to the rest of the country. Now they got to continue on to play well, right? It can't just be we beat LSU and now we can kind of lay back and everything's done. There's a full long season to go, and if SC with the new extended format of 12 teams, if SC is not like right in there or in the conversation or at least kind of be thought of maybe being one of those 12 teams, all that criticism is going to come back on Lincoln Riley.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting. You make your point about, is USC back on a national level, right? You're trying to convince people that the Trojans have, some kind of staying power. You look at their schedule and like it all shakes out actually in a pretty favorable way, right? You got the tough games against LSU and Michigan in the first 4 weeks, but if you're going to catch either of those two teams, that's a pretty darn good time to do it, right? We know Michigan's going to be really good at some point this year. They're going to develop that hard nose. They're not going to be replacing, 21 starters forever. That's a team that, week 12 is going to be really good. You get in week 4, all of a sudden, if you start this season 3-0, you're looking at a situation where you don't leave the West Coast after the first weekend in October. There's no cold weather Big Ten games. I mean, there's a real opportunity to put together a run. Now, I want to go back to Lincoln here for a second because one thing that I thought was so interesting that we finally got proof of in this game was the total change in mentality, right? He made some behavioral changes in how they practiced. They changed their whole defensive coaching staff. But until you really see it on the field, it's kind of tough to believe him when he said, we're going to play good defense. We're a defensive team now. And I thought it wasn't lip service. Absolutely not. The way that they prioritized that side of the ball, I thought showed up in other areas, right? His play calling, I think, was with the defense in mind. I think there were a lot of situations the last couple of years, the defense ended up in some tough spots because I don't think Lincoln Riley really cared about where they were on the field. Field position mattered less, and we didn't see that. So I'm interested. Have you ever encountered a coach who really has pivoted so significantly in just a single off season? Because it seemed like an entirely different approach to the game from Lincoln.
I've been, I was lucky enough to play a long time in the NFL, and I've been in different situations where where offensively the offense was the strength, and we knew going in, look, we better score 30 or we're not going to win. And we played to those strengths. So we took more chances, right? We went for it on fourth down or, third and long. It wasn't just punt. It was, let's try to get the first down. Whereas if you do have a great defense, sometimes your mentality, and this trickles down to the quarterback who's really on the field doing that, is knowing that I got a great defense. I'm not going to force the ball on anything. I'm going to punt, put him in, field position is going to be key. So I'm going to put him in a tough situation like that. Let my defense get a 3 and out, and I'll get the ball back. And then been another situations where, no, we got to force it. We got to get that first down. And I think that, early on in that game against LSU, it felt like, oh, here we go. We're going to bend and not break. They were hitting, every third down. They were, I forget his name off the top of my head now. Number 2 for LSU was really a really good wide receiver, but he was catching everything. He had 12 catches in the first quarter. I mean, he was catching everything, and it felt like, man, we're giving up so much cushion. We're giving away so much. We're just being very passive. But then as they got inside the 20-yard line, we started to hunker down and had some big stops. And then in the second half, I think we played a lot more aggressive, and there were some blitzes in there. There were some tackles for losses. There were some things that we did where we were much more aggressive than they were. And you didn't really see that last year. It was that all day long, we'll bend, but they eventually broke. Whereas in this first game, it was, we'll bend a little bit, but we're not going to break. And that was the difference for me. And looking at this team is that it felt like Lincoln Riley had faith in his defense that they could get stops.
So with that defense coached by first-year defensive coordinator Danton Lynn, there are a few things that really jump out right away. The first of which being they were simply organized. They knew where they needed to be on the
Yeah.
field. I think there was a very strong understanding of the base scheme, which is a really low bar to clear, but that's also the bar that we're dealing with at SC after the last 2 years of Alex Grinch. But what really struck me was the combination of physicality and how that translated into tackling, not just in the gaps,
Yeah.
but open field tackling. I mean, this looked like an entirely different defense. It's so interesting, though, because I'm not sure how much of a difference the scheme makes as opposed to simply putting players in positions to be themselves. And I'm curious, when you watch this defense, what was the first thing that really popped to your eyes? What was it that you saw that made you think, okay, this is not fool's gold. This might actually be a good defense, not simply, a couple of key plays went our way here or there, but this thing might have staying power.
Yeah, I think the first thing you mentioned was, guys lining up and being in the right spots. So often last year we saw just getting guys to line up correctly was a challenge. You saw, guys running wide open, and it's like, who's got that area of defense? Who's got that coverage on that side? Where's the fit from the linebacker? Why is that hole so big? Why is he going 10 yards before he gets touched? I mean, it just felt like everybody was not on the same page last year or the last couple of years. And this year, it felt like even though they had got some chunk yardage in the first half, it was everybody was in the right spot. They were making tackles, even on some plays that they may have gained some yardage. They were making the tackles. They were swarming the football. And then when it was time to be aggressive, they were aggressive and got some tackles for losses. They had some timely blitzes that got home. You didn't see that the last couple of years. So I think playing with aggression, especially if you're an athletic defense, which I Bleav USC is, play to their advantage. And I know there was a lot of concern, playing against an SEC team. Oh, it's going to be physical, and that's the narrative, right? SC, even with the other teams, Oregon and UCLA and Washington going to the Big, oh, they can't play physical. They're not going to play physical. Big Ten plays physical. How are they going to compete against the SEC and the Big Ten? Well, I think they were the more physical team against LSU, and it showed up, especially in the second half. And that physicality and that mentality comes from defense. And so I was very impressed in the way they handled, especially the second half and their aggression. But it was night and day from what we saw the last couple of years.
I want to zoom out here to the 10,000 feet and take a look down at the team right now, because my expectation coming into the year, very tempered expectations, felt they'd be somewhere between 8-4 and 10-2. Thought 9-3, 10-2 was likelier than 8-4. And with the win over LSU, that pathway to 10-2 still gets much easier. But my takeaway during the game, and I think there was a point kind of late in the third quarter, early in the fourth quarter, where it felt like the game might be slipping away a little bit. You have a quick possession, LSU's an opportunity to go up 2 scores, and that's when the defense really made a huge stop. But my takeaway at that time was, there is still a personnel issue to some extent on this roster. I think that they're going to encounter a few games this year where they might just not have the horses for a full 60-minute fight. Maybe it's Penn State. Maybe it's Michigan. I mean, Notre Dame's obviously great again this year. But the way I see it is there are 2 things that I think we can count on with this team every week. A-plus effort and coaching that will never lose us the game. And I think those 2 things will be consistent every week. Now, what is your perspective? What do you expect to see from this team? And what conclusions can you draw on the big picture from, just a couple of games here?
Well, I think look, the season is gonna determine, and we're gonna see how both these teams progress as the season goes on. And one game does not make a season, but I think that most people felt going into this year that while the SEC is going to be competitive, LSU was going to be in that conversation. Maybe not to the extent of Georgia. Texas obviously moving to the SEC is going to be in the conversation. But I think a lot of people felt that LSU was going to be in that conversation too, and pretty much everybody picked them to beat SC. The fact that they were to not just win that game, but to be the more physical team in that game, at least in my opinion, was a big plus for USC. Now, going forward, there are going to be some challenges. But you mentioned they got Michigan in September, so it's not going to be a late November game in Ann Arbor. They got Penn State at home, right? Notre Dame comes here. There's an opportunity for USC to kind of roll each week and get their confidence up. And don't get me wrong, this was a tremendous confidence booster for this team. If they can build on this, they got a shot to get on a roll and play, because they've got enough athletes, and I think they've got enough physicality to play with anybody. And if that game did anything, it gave them so much confidence going in to the rest of the season. Now they've got Utah State, so let's not get complacent. They got to go in and dominate Utah State. Not saying that they're not a good team, but they should beat them. And then it gets intense. And so I think with their confidence level coming out of that game, they just got to build on that. But I feel very comfortable with where they are right now.
Well, Rodney, I appreciate your time. It's been great chatting with you. It's always great talking USC football. Brother, safe travels and fight on.
Fight on, baby. Fight on.